Welcome, my friends, to another edition, this special Hanukkah edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. And there is no better present for either Hanukkah, Christmas, or Kwanzaa, or whatever you're celebrating, than a carton of Camels. Make sure you get the unfiltered, the filter is just nonsense, and it takes away from the absolute smoking pleasure of this fine Turkish tobacco. Well, my friends, it's Hanukkah. Tonight is the fourth night of Hanukkah, and there are two topics that I want to cover today, if I can manage to get through them. One is miracles, and by the way, I do have. Last year, I did a piece on the miracle of Hanukkah, which I discussed the oil and the miracle and what was the miracle of Hanukkah. So you can go back and take a look at that. Just search for, Mehler Hanukkah and or Mehler miracle. At any rate, so I wanted to talk about miracles today a little bit. And rape. So the topics for today are miracles and rape. Start with miracles. Obviously, this is Hanukkah, and we're celebrating the great miracle. And the idea that the miracle was the oil, that it's larger than that. The story of the oil is not found anywhere in the original, in book 1 or 2 of the Maccabees, or it's just not there. It's not even mentioned. There's no oil. There's no miracles. The miracle is that they survived. That's the miracle. And that is where I think I'd like to start. Now, I've seen growing up in America, I've seen a lot of miracle workers who every Sunday could call people up, to the podium and command Satan to leave their bodies, and they would get up and walk and dance, and I tend to I tend to be skeptical of miracle workers and claims of miracle workers, but this is a case of when you take a look at Jewish history. And you go back to I said last week, you go back to the time of the ancient the Canaanite tribes. The Israelites were like the Moabites and the Midianites and the Amalekites and the Ugarites. These were all Canaanite tribes, and they're all gone. I mean, it's just, it's like in 1928, 29, some French archaeologists found a library in Ras Shamra in Syria of Ugaritic texts. And until they found this, until 1929, until this discovery, all we knew that there were these people, the Ugarites, and there were little things on pottery, but we had none of their literature. And then suddenly this whole library opens up, and it was an incredible find. The material was written 2 or 3 centuries before the biblical texts. The earliest biblical texts were written, and they contained many of the same stories. They contained the flood, and with various minor differences. Obviously, they weren't exactly the same, but it was easy to read because it was an ancient Canaanite text, which Hebrew is simply one. It's a Canaanite text, a Canaanite language. So when we found the Ugaritic text, it was fairly easy to read them because we were accustomed to the language. That's what should have been the fate of the Israelites as well. I mean, the Israelites should have been completely lost and forgotten. After all, it wasn't just that in the very earliest stages, the threat of annihilation was there. But later, once you get to the Hanukkah story, you really have these powerful empires, and Antiochus Epiphanes comes and he wants to exterminate the Jews. He wants to get rid of us, and their empire is gone. Their gods are in museums, um, and we went on. The Romans tried to do the same thing. We went through 2,000 years of diaspora. I mean, how much abuse can you take? And it's not just the miracle that we survived, and a lot of people might disagree that it's a miracle, but I've been contemplating this for all my professional career, and I've discussed with other scholars as well. It's very hard to explain the uniqueness of the Jewish experience through time and cultures. I mean, we barely are 1% of the world's population. We're uh, so few and far between, and yet our presence is so marked. If you think about, Jesus and Freud and Marx and Einstein, we've had a few good hits, but also just the incredible success that Jews have had in every field, in journalism and music and entertainment, in philosophy and in theology, and just every single field. We have astonishingly outstanding contributions that are completely out of proportion to our numbers. Um, so I'm in awe of this. I mean, I have no way to explain it, but something being inexplicable doesn't mean that it's a miracle. A miracle implies that, that after all, what happened was that this was the result of God's promise that we would survive. And the theory of the show is that everything you ever believed for sure is completely untrue. And one of the fundamental things that we have always believed is that not only that there is divine providence, but that in the end there will be redemption. And the end is not going to be destruction; is going to be redemption, and that will be miraculous. Um, and while I find a lot of things to be inexplicable, bordering on the miraculous, including the nature of reality itself. You take a look at matter and energy. Energy has no mass, but it can be converted into matter, which has mass. And when you take a look at the fundamental building blocks of all matter, you find that the proton is made of two up quarks and a down quark, but that's only 1% of the mass of the proton. 99% of the mass of the proton comes from, we said that energy can become matter and matter can become energy. So what holds these three quarks together is the gluons, which are massless, extremely powerful, energetic, like photons, um, and they are constantly creating, the energy is constantly creating, splitting into matter and antimatter, a positive and a negative, and these are called C quarks, and the C quarks come into existence for just the briefest moment, and then they annihilate. And so you have this 99% of the mass of the proton is actually something that comes and goes and is not stable at all, and it's what we learned about the electron. The electron is not anywhere. I mean, when Heisenberg explained that the electron was in a superposition, what he meant is that it's not here or there. It is actually nowhere. It only exists in interactions. And in these quantum leaps, that's the only time we have any indication that they exist. And they are not in any one place. They are in a superposition, which is that they are in fact nowhere. So I mean, I love this stuff, and the more you think about it, the less sense it makes that we are here. I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, it's miraculous that we exist at all. So, but as far as God coming and saving us from ourselves, that kind of a miracle, absolutely, um, can't believe it. And I don't think that we're anything special. I think here we are, 99.9% of all of the things that ever, all of the living creatures that ever existed on this planet have gone extinct, and so shall we in the very near future, and nothing is going to save us. There's not going to be any kind of miracles to save us. But uh, the fact, it's not just the fact that I'm here, but it's the fact that I'm here with my grandfather's Gemara, with all this material that we carried through from our earliest. One of the amazing things about Hebrew is that it's a very transparent language. By transparency, it has great transparency. You can easily read Hebrew that's 2,000 years old and Hebrew that's contemporary. And they're not so far different. I mean, it's not like English or German. If you take a look at, try to read Beowulf, it's extremely. I defy anybody to really just understand it. But Hebrew, that's not the case. In Hebrew, I have access to medieval Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, modern Hebrew. If you know Hebrew, you can. This entire world opens up to you. And what we have had is a continuous 3,000-year history in which we have been dispersed to all the four corners of the earth and have continued a conversation in Hebrew around the same texts. Basically, Judaism is a form of synchronized reading. We read the same stuff over and over again, and everybody's got their own thoughts on what it means, and then you add to it and add to it and add to it. So it's this now monumental library of material thought that has emerged out of this original conversation that continues to this day. So that's the miracle of Hanukkah. The next issue is a little tougher to discuss, and that's rape. And unfortunately, this Hanukkah, we really need to deal with rape as an instrument of war, an instrument of genocide. I mentioned last week with the story of Dina, and obviously, I don't want to go into the details of the horrific assaults that were perpetrated on October 7th. But I wanted to talk a little bit more generally about rape. It's I got involved in this issue back in the 1970s when I was coming out. I was exploring my sexuality, and I had a friend on campus who had been arrested for. He was in the park. Gay men, often you have to find a place where you can have sex, and so you can't have it at home with you if your mother and father are there, and your business partners and everything else, and you want to, so it's very you want to keep everything hidden, and so you go to the park in the bushes, and you see another guy, and and you wink at each other or whatever, and and you have sex. And he went to the park, and the guy winked at him, and it turned out that the guy who winked at him was a cop. And they had this program in St. Louis in the 70s. It's a common program, and it wasn't unique to there, called Bag of Fag, where you go and you arrest gay men in areas where they meet. And so he was arrested. They put him in jail, and he was raped. And he was a law school student. And he was in this position where he couldn't do anything about it if he wanted to continue his career. His parents didn't know. It was this awful and horrible experience. And I thought, oh my God, that, So I began to look into the situation, and it turned out that I was at Washington University in St. Louis, and down the ways a bit there was Marion Federal Penitentiary, and at Marion Federal Penitentiary there was a one of the Marion brothers, one of the political prisoners at Marion Federal Penitentiary was Russell Smith, who was a gay inmate, and he was in it because was challenging the Federal Bureau of Prisons uh, for the right to receive gay literature in prison. The prison authorities argued that if you receive gay literature, everybody's going to know you're gay and you'll get raped. And Russell's argument was, I'm being raped all the time anyway. You're not protecting me at all. You're denying me access to a community that can support me. So he was a prison lawyer, and he files suit. And the only way you can bring the case to be transferred from Lompoc, wherever you are, to Marion, which was the maximum security prison. In other words, it was a kind of disincentive because you were going to have to go to this really horrific prison. And but he went in order to present his case, uh, and um, and I got in touch with him, and I decided that I would, help with a support committee on the outside. He's, bringing the case, and it would be helpful if people knew what he was doing and if it was publicized. And I was a journalist at the time, as well as a graduate student, and I started writing articles about what was happening with him. Well, it turns out that he had been raped several months before, and in the process of that rape, he had taken a shard of glass and had slit this guy's throat. It didn't kill him, but it was so. And at the time, the prison authorities had said they realized that this was a rape, and then they weren't going to press charges or anything like that. But now, shortly before his case was coming to trial, they released him as a federal prisoner, which meant that he no longer had standing to bring his case because he was no longer a federal prisoner. And then they charged him with assault with intent to commit murder in that case from several months before, and they shipped him back. I think it was to Lompoc, in fact, for trial for murder, for attempted murder. And so that's when I created the Committee to Free Russell Smith, and I had contacts. The gay movement was a global movement, and so I was writing and telling people what was going on with this. This is really very unfair, and it received a lot of publicity. And the Federal Bureau of Prisons began to get a whole lot of pushback on the case, and eventually they released Russell. They just let him go. And they give him back his good time, whatever, and they just let him go. And he arrived in St. Louis straight out of solitary confinement, and I took him into my apartment, and he and I created People Organized to Stop Rape of Imprisoned Persons, POSRIP, POSRIP. Really catchy. I mean, just anyway. But and a year later, Russell and I separated. He went to Chicago. I had nothing really more to do with. That first year, I was involved in organizing things, and then he went to Chicago, and the he left POSRIP, and it was picked up by someone else and renamed Stop Prison Rape, much more sensible name. And later it became Just Detention International, which is what it is today. And Just Detention International has recently, well, for the last 3 years, actually, they've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee is considering giving a prize that would help foster the anti-rape movement, because rape is such an extraordinarily common form of abuse. So what I just wanted to, as a historian, I wanted to introduce you to a few of the things. So if you're interested in that, there's oh, here it is. Yeah, excuse me. This is Catherine Jacquard, and The Injustices of Rape. This is a book about how activists responded to rape in prison, and she has copies of the correspondence, my prison correspondence with Russell, and is working on a new book, which is coming out soon. The other thing I wanted to show you was this is uh, Lynn Sacco, and it's Unspeakable, Father-Daughter Incest in American History. And this is the most amazing story. Between the 1890s and 1920s, scientific research developed so that you could test for gonorrhea, and you could know that whether someone had gonorrhea or whether they just had some other kind of infection. And public health officials at the time were discovering that there was an epidemic of gonorrhea, and they were also noticing a very disturbing correspondence with fathers and daughters, both of whom had gonorrhea. And so now you could tell because they're the father, you test them both and they both have gonorrhea. And so how was it possible for the daughter to develop gonorrhea? We're talking about white middle-class men, respectable people. It was just not possible to imagine that they were having sex with their daughters. So the explanation was that, well, the girls were getting it from the toilet seats or from other, it was transmitted because the mother didn't keep the house clean enough, and the germs were getting to her daughter because the mother was to blame. We got this figured out by 1998. In 1998, let's see find out where exactly where that post published. In 1998, oh, I can't find it. Okay, wouldn't you know? In 1998, it's like the Journal of uh, uh, here it is. Oh, there it is. The American Academy of Pediatrics. Okay, so in 1998, the American Academy of Pediatrics emphasized that gonorrhea, quote, is in a child is diagnostic of abuse with very rare exceptions, and it warned physicians that, quote, a conclusion that transmission was non-sexual is unacceptable. Took a while, actually took a while to get that straight. And I think that, everything we ever thought we knew for sure, one of the things that we don't even think about and certainly don't know for sure is how widespread sexual abuse and rape is in society in general, in families. I mean, most women will be raped by a member of her family. But you also have then, there's a book, I teach genocide. When you teach genocide, rape is a form of warfare. It's a tactic that has been used over and over again. And so you have all this horrific literature on rape and genocide. The Last Girl is a wonderful memoir of a Yazidi woman who survived the sexual slavery imposed on Yazidis by ISIS, and today the Yazidi are very aggressively demanding that the rapists, the individual rapists, be tracked down, charged, brought into court, tried, convicted, and sent to jail. And they have had some success in doing this. You have some Yazidi women in Germany who they see someone they know he was a rapist, and now he's living as a refugee in Germany, he has refugee status, and this whole complex procedure is necessary because they're determined. And this was something that that Jews found, Simon Wiesenthal, after the Holocaust. What you want is a modicum of justice, and it's important. It's important to convict, for example, Omar al-Bashir, who ran the genocide in Sudan. It's important to bring these people to to justice, to convict them, to try them, to sentence them, and to imprison them, as a some sort of a break on the widespread use of rape in warfare. There's an excellent book on his Our Bodies, Their Battlefields. Forget the author of it. I have a book. So there you have it. Last week, miracles and rape, and just wanted to say one last thing. Michael J. Fox. There's a documentary about his Parkinson's, and there's a scene in which he's taken some meds and he's waiting for the meds to kick in because he can't think clearly and he can't stabilize himself. And as he's waiting for the drugs to kick in, he explains to the correspondent that this is what I call waiting for the bus. He's waiting for the bus. And then the bus arrives, he gets on the bus, and the meds kick in, and he can finally think. And I got up this morning, and I had to wait for the bus. You get up in the morning, many people experience this, and you can't think straight until you have a cup of coffee. But a part of this aging process is that I have a limited amount of time that I have some clarity to think and read and learn, and my retention is not as good as it used to be. So what I was saying last week about dementia is, time is running out, not only for all of us, but I am a individual creature on this planet, and I just am so glad to have these last few moments where I can explain myself these last few times as we are approaching our extinction. And I really don't have a lot to give, except that I first became convinced that we were at the end in 2012. So I've had some time to mull over what it all means and how we can possibly respond to a world in which one has to surrender to the inevitable. So that's all for this week. I just wanted to say, have a good week. Enjoy the holidays, whatever holidays you want to enjoy. And I will be back next week with more bad news.